Bones and All is a 2022 movie based on the book from the same name by Camille De Angelis, published in 2015, and adapted to a movie script by David Kajganich and directed by Luca Guadagnino. Luca Guadagnino's previous work included the remix of Suspiria from 2019, which was so amazing, majority of people tell it is better than the original. And of course, the memorable Call Me By Your Name movie, which helped Timothée Chalamet to break out into the mainstream. Now, as you can tell, Luca is a very versatile director, and for this reason, Bones and All was my most anticipated movie from 2022. And not only because of his involvement, but also because this movie is a cannibal coming-of-age romance horror road trip movie. It sounds like Luca was interested in bringing both of his previous work and mesh them together, and I was very ready to see that. And honestly, it delivered. Let's talk about the synopsis of the movie first. In 1988, Maren sneaks out to attend a sleepover with her classmates, where she bites through a girl's finger, partially severing it. Once she runs back home covered in blood, her father Frank swiftly relocates them to Maryland, where he promptly abandons her, leaving her with nothing but with a tape where he explains his past with her mother and where to find her. During this trip, Maren meets other eaters just like her, until she settles with Lee, who is willing to help her find her mother. And it is during this trip in the Midwest that they fall in love. Starting from there, it becomes slightly noticeable that this movie is not that much about cannibalism. And while there are very graphic scenes in the movie, they are very few, and we spend more time of the movie following Maren's personal journey. We start the movie with Maren at school, alone in the music room where a classmate comes running towards her in good faith. She's letting her know that the teacher decided to leave her spot in the yearbook without her picture since she never showed up to take it. Maren shrugs it off and the girl keeps talking, inviting Maren for a sleepover. Maren tells her friend her dad won't let her go, and so the friend suggests that she should sneak out. And like a 15-year-old who wants to have friends, who wants to be a part of a group, Maren does. She is well received at the sleepover, and the group of girls began chit-chatting about nail polish. The girl who invited Maren is lying next to her, showing her the color she had picked for her nails. As Maren takes her hand to have a closer look at it, she brings a finger to her mouth and begins sucking on it till she is biting the skin off. The girl starts screaming hysterically and trying to push off Maren. When Maren realizes what she has been doing, she runs out of the house and into the rain. She goes back home, and with just one look at her bloody pajamas, her father knows exactly what she did. And so, they pack their bags and leave the town behind. Assuming it had been a couple of days, Maren and her father had settled in an abandoned house, sleeping on a couch on the floor. One morning, Maren wakes up looking for her father when she finds an envelope with money and her birth certificate, and a tape where her father lets her know he has left her since he can no longer deal with her anymore. In this tape, her father also leaves information for Maren to go and look for her mother since she was an eater just like her. During this trip, the first person Maren finds is Sully, an eater just like her, who teaches her eaters had a refined sense of smell and that she can train it to help her find other eaters, just like he did with her. Sully invites her into a house, which becomes clear real soon it is not Sully's house. It is a lady's house he had attacked and is planning on eating her. Sully mentions to Maren a little about his life as an eater. He is someone who basically has no one and moves from place to place eating people, but now that Maren is there, they can try to travel together and help each other. Maren smiles awkwardly at him, not knowing what to do. While she never states it, it is clear she is not comfortable with Sully, but for the moment, it's the best she has right now, and also, the smell of flesh is inevitably attracting her. She is hungry after all. The next morning, Maren wakes up to find Sully eating down on the lady and she joins him. In his bag, Sully has a bag with a long rope of hair. He explains to Maren it is a souvenir from all the people he has eaten, a way to honor their lives, or at least something to remember them by. After feasting, Sully goes to take a shower and Maren takes the chance to run away and board a bus to the next city. It is in this new location where she has her fateful encounter with Lee. A random guy in a supermarket is clearly an asshole and is harassing a woman at the store. And Maren watches as Lee approaches the dude and steals his hat, luring him out of the store. Maren follows Lee into an abandoned building, and from a window, Lee jumps out into vision, now wearing the hat of the man. The two of them come face to face and they connect the dots because of the smell. Just like Sully explained to Maren, eaters identify each other by smell. Back in the store, Maren smelled Lee, and that's why she knew where he took the guy, and she knows Lee ate the guy. And it goes the same for Lee. He knew right away Maren was another eater. They introduce each other, and at first, Lee is a bit brash with Maren and she is a bit shy, but Lee agrees to help her. At the end of the day, Lee is another young teen who has kind of run away from home, so he also has no one. From here, Lee and Maren start spending their days together. They stop at the house of the dude Lee killed to sleep for the night, then they make a stop at Lee's town where Maren meets his sister Kayla, who is the person Lee loves the most in his family, and then they start going from state to state to find Maren's mother, and obviously through this time they fall in love and make a home of each other. However, not everything is as sweet as they would want. In one of their spots, Lee is eyeing a guy who works at the local fair. He approaches the guy and starts a conversation. After some small talk, Lee decides he's a good prey, and so when the fair closes, Lee takes the guy into a cornfield with the promise of a good time together. But surely, Lee kills the guy so he and Maren can feed. After this, they follow their modus operandi, that is basically to check for the guy's address with the intention to go and have a shower and spend the night there before moving to their next location. But when they arrive at the house, they realize the guy was not a single man living on his own, but a man with a wife and children. This deeply upsets both Maren and Lee, and they flee the scene in panic. This starts a fight between them. Maren starts yelling at Lee for choosing a man who had a family because they are supposed to kill people whose death would impact the fewest people possible, and they just destroyed a family. Lee argues he didn't know he had a family. Let's remember that this movie is in the late 80s, where the LGBTQ were still looked down upon, especially on the Midwest of the United States. So Lee had assumed that the man had no one waiting for him if he was willing to follow a stranger into a cornfield to have a sexual encounter. They are forced to continue their way because otherwise they could be linked to the murder of the guy, but now there's obviously a new fissure in their relationship. They finally arrive to the town where Maren's mother supposedly is, and the first person Maren finds is her grandmother, with who things do not go great. At first she lies telling Maren her mother died. Then she comes clean and reveals her mother was an adoptee and that she led home for years and then reappeared in such a delicate mental state she had to be put in a mental institution. The lady gives Maren the name of the place where her mother is and asks her to never show up ever again. Maren and Lee drive down the mental institution and Maren is allowed to see her mother, but the nurses warn her she is not in a good state of mind and that no one has stopped to visit her in years. Now, this meeting also goes south. Maren finds out her mother is an eater just like her and that she ate her own hands, and thanks to her medication, she can barely speak. A nurse hands Maren a letter where her mother acknowledges that she left Maren to take care of her father in the hopes that she could have a better life, and that if she is reading the letter, it means her father broke his promise. Her mother left her a very dreadful letter, telling her people like them will never find happiness and that they are better locked up somewhere or dead. Maren's mother then launches at her, trying to harm her, but she is stopped by the nurses and Maren runs out. Outside of the institution, Maren meets with Lee. She is agitated, and soon she starts an argument with Lee, who is failing to be sympathetic with Maren's situation. Instead of understanding she has been left without any of her parents and a big disappointment to find her mother in such a state, Lee tells her things are like that for people like them. This angers Maren, and she brings back the topic of the guy Lee killed at the cornfield who had a family. As someone who recently lost her father and discovered her mother can't be with her either, obviously the topic of ripping a parent away from a home hits a very sensitive spot on Maren. While Lee has grown up now used to be without his family and used to his situation, Maren has not. She had hope and she just lost that spark, so she is in a vulnerable state. Maren is so affected by the recent happenings that the next day, as Lee and her are making a stop to rest, Maren leaves him as he is sleeping, also leaving behind her money so he could put gas into his car. On her way, Maren drops the letter her mother left her and the picture she got from her grandmother. Lee surely wakes up, and when finding Maren has left him, he immediately starts looking for her. And with Maren, well, Sully, the old creepy guy from the start of the movie, finds her. It's revealed Sully didn't find her, but that he has been following her all this time. But he didn't approach her because he saw her with Lee, who he calls her little friend. Sully invites Maren to have a ride with him, and Maren states that she is a girl and he is an old man. Sully agrees, saying she could be his daughter, and laughs. Maren questions if that's all there is, a father-daughter relationship. Sully hesitates and then asks Maren if she had ever just connected with someone, and she says she has, but that it has to go both ways, establishing she doesn't feel the same about Sully. Sully then asks her if that means she doesn't want to get in the car with him, and Maren says that she doesn't, and that she's uncomfortable with him following her. Sully says fuck you to Maren, insults her a bit more, and then leaves. After that, Mari is left so shaken that she concludes she doesn't need to be alone out there. She had Lee, with who she connected, who she loved, and so she goes out looking out for him. Maren first finds Lee's sister Kayla, and she reveals to Maren his location and how hard it has been for him when his father disappeared. He was an abusive drunk man, and Lee beat him up after he attacked Kayla. When the police came to the house, Lee was drenched in blood and his father was gone. Since the police couldn't find his father, they locked Lee up and released him after they found the blood on his clothes was his own. But that didn't stop people from saying Lee killed his father, and that's why he is always on the run. Maren finds Lee in a lake and they get back together. They start driving across towns again till they finally choose somewhere they like and settle there. They get jobs and a small apartment together, living a quiet, calm life together. This is until one night Sully breaks into their apartment, convincing Maren that Lee is not the guy for her and to go with him. Sully tries abusing Maren, but Lee arrives on time. The three of them get into a fight till they win and kill Sully. Maren looks into his bag and realizes the new hair in Sully's robe, and that is none other than Kayla's hair, Lee's sister. Sully killed her and ate her. He was still following Maren even when she rejected him and saw her talking to her, and probably killed her in anger and revenge at Maren. Lee received a stab near his heart and he is bleeding out. Maren tries to save Lee, but it becomes evidently that he is about to die, and as a last wish, Lee pleads Maren to eat him. Maren doesn't want to, but Lee tells her the only way he wants to die is if she eats him. And finally, in tears, she does. And there the movie ends. This has to be for sure one of my favorite coming-of-age movies in a long while because of how unusual but universal the message is. This time, Guadagnino uses cannibalism to represent something that society looks down upon, so the audience can understand that the two leads are different from everybody else and how difficult it is for them to find someone who understands what it's like. And the thing is, you don't need to be a cannibal to understand this feeling. Even today, when we seem to be the most progressive we have been, it seems the fight will never end. The sense of being marginalized for different parts of our identity, like our skin color, our sexuality, or the state of our mental health, is still very prevalent. Of course, being a cannibal is fundamentally wrong both morally and in nature, but Guadagnino is not comparing being an outcast or being a cannibal, but more how society makes you feel about it. If you live outside of the norms, society will portray you on the worst light possible and sometimes shame you to the point you feel ashamed of yourself. The two themes that I picked up from this movie were home and identity. As we can tell in Bones and All, broken families and the sense of missing a home or losing a home is very prevalent in the movie. Maren was on a journey of self-discovery. She's figuring out who she is without her father, her only family, and part of that process is finding a place to call home. When she meets Sully, she learns something new about her condition, and when she meets Lee, she found someone she connects with, someone who supports her and who is also teaching her as well. He has already gone through what Maren is currently going on, and he has been trying to be a good guy for her, protecting her and feeding her. However, in order to find a home and be accepted, one needs to accept themselves. When Maren leaves Lee, the closest thing to a home she had had since her father left her, it is in a moment when she not only feels alone, she purposely is isolating herself because she feels she cannot trust anyone and that she has no one. But when she talks to Kayla and she explains the burden Lee has been living with, she understands that maybe he didn't go through what she did, but he had gone through his own path and went through a pain that assimilates hers. He also had a hard time coming down to terms with who he is. It wasn't that he was indifferent with her pain, it was just that he was done with the self-accepting process Maren was going through. And so she accepts herself and accepts Lee, both the same but different. And so they start a life together. She finds a home. That's why the ending of the movie was so heart-wrenching for me. Through thick and thin, they came out together and they were separated at the end. And to explain the end, we need to explain the title of the movie. During the movie, the term bones and all is mentioned. In the cannibalism world, it's when they eat a victim entirely, even the bones. But once we look at the concept of cannibalism as a metaphor, we need to look at this term on the same way. Bones and all sounds very similar to the phrase warts and all, which refers to the everything of someone, all of their qualities, including the bad ones. So, in the context of the movie, eating someone bones and all could refer to sharing love with someone where both involved accept each other completely for who they are, just like Maren and Lee. And when Maren decided to eat Lee at the end, she eats him bones and all. She is taking him with everything he is, the good and the bad. So, as it is tragic, it's also Maren learning how to wholly love someone else and love herself entirely. This movie is really about what it's like to feel different from others and how good, even wonderful, it feels to find our place in the world. Even when, more than finding, we had to build such a place for ourselves. The existence of Sully is to show the shadow of what loneliness can do to someone. Sully gets obsessed with Maren because he thought he finally found someone after being alone for decades. They ate together and that gave him the sense that he had found someone who belonged together with him. But at that point, decades of roaming alone has left him unhinged. And I think that's why Maren goes to Lee after Sully finds her again. She recognizes how rare what Lee and she had was. She is watching in Sully what she can become if she decides to be alone and lets go of the only person who loves her completely and that she also loves him back the same. Be who they are, it's very difficult to find someone like that, and she would be crazy to let go of something so rare and special, so she goes back. Another aspect of the movie that constantly shines is also morality. The way they choose their victims is to try to make others suffer the least. They choose victims who seem to have very few personal relationships, so their absence won't gravely affect the others. Both Lee and Maren come from broken homes. They know what it is to lose a father and have a mother who wants nothing to do with them. So that's why when they kill the guy at the fair and find out he was a father and he had a family waiting for him, they are so affected. They had killed and ate people before, but now they also have the burden that they took away a father from their children. They knew what those kids were going to go through, the hardships they had unleashed on that family. They condemned those kids to the same pain they had been going through. Bones and All is a movie about identity, who they are in the world, and their place in it. I think that using cannibalism to embody why they are different in their world opens the door to anyone who has felt like they do not fit in to identify with the story. Once you look past the cannibalism and look at their struggles from a neutral stand, you can understand their journey in a deeper level. What Lee and Maren go through is a very human experience, and I adore that. And as for me, please remember that you can find me everywhere on the internet. I am on Twitter, I'm on Twitch every Wednesdays and Friday unless something happens. I'm also on Instagram and on TikTok recommending movies.